Welcome back to another episode of Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and if you're serious about improving your financial education, you are in the right place. Today, we're diving into the exciting topic, double your compounding power, explode your wealth. Now, before we get started, just a quick reminder, if you enjoy the show, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Your feedback really helps us to bring you the content that you want to hear, and don't forget to visit stockcastbonus.com for free access to some valuable educational resources that can boost your financial knowledge. Joining us today is Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner. Andy, it's great to have you back on the show.
Fantastic to be here, Del. Excited to dive into this important topic. We're going to have a lot of fun today.
All right, so let's just start with compounding. What is it? They say it's a huge thing. It's one of the most powerful forces. Tell me in your own words, what is compounding? Why is it so important to investors?
Compounding is reinvestment. I think that's the best sentence you could use is you're adding to something, right? Compounding means you're making something bigger. And so inevitably, people have to endure my Aesop's fable of the goose that lays golden eggs. Simply means that if you have a goose that gives you an egg, you have two choices. You could go spend it on a doodad and buy something with the egg, or you could buy another goose that lays golden eggs. Well, if you choose to buy another goose that lays golden eggs, now you have two geese that are both laying golden eggs. So now you got two golden eggs coming out each month or whatever it is. Well, if you go out and you invest in more, then you have four geese and then 8 and then 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1,024, 2,048. I mean, you can go forever with those compounding numbers. And so it's reinvestment. It's when you take the cash flow that has come from an investment and you use it to buy more shares, more properties, more business, more of anything. That's what compounding is, taking what you are receiving and then reinvesting it into things that make even more money. And it is the most powerful wealth building force in the universe. Nothing is close.
Very true. Now, for someone that's new to investing, advanced strategies like reinvestment, maximizing returns, minimizing costs, it can seem a little overwhelming or feel a little overwhelming. Can you break this down for us? Like, how do these strategies really work in the real world?
Yeah, and I don't know that they are that complex. I think there's a fog in people's brains that when they hear finance, they think of people in suits on Wall Street with a briefcase that have all this knowledge that they don't have. And while knowledge is certainly critical, compounding is really as much about discipline and consistency as it is about knowledge. Certainly, I need to know how to get a return on investment. That takes knowledge. That takes experience. That takes practice. That takes making mistakes and learning. But once I have an asset, simply making the decision to take monies from that asset and put it into more assets, that's just a decision to make. That's just an issue of, do I want to spend this money on a doodad, or do I want to spend this money creating more wealth? So, the idea of compounding, I think people hear that word, think, well, that's complex. No, it is a decision to ask yourself as you're listening to this Stockcast, what is, like, it's a great opportunity for self-reflection. What is the last asset you purchased? Does that asset create cash flow? And if it does, are you taking that cash flow and reinvesting in similar assets? If the answer to that is no, anywhere in that chain, you're not compounding. If you don't have assets, you're not compounding. If the assets aren't producing cash flow to be reinvested, you're not compounding. And if you take that cash flow and invest in something other than more assets, you're not compounding. So that's pretty easy as 1, 2, 3 right there. The question is, am I doing this stuff, and is talking about it become a substitute for actually doing it? And that might be something to talk about too, maybe in the second half as a pitfall to compounding. But that's all it is. It's reinvestment.
Well, speaking of pitfalls and maybe some misconceptions, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Maybe to say bad information. There's not a lot of accurate information, and the reason why I say that is, there's some common misconceptions that people have about compounding strategies. For me, I think about mutual funds. You talk about it in 401k, your book. What's what are some other misconceptions that you can talk on about compounding and maybe mutual funds or, really building your wealth?
So that's a huge issue that you've just brought up. Compounding to answer that question, maybe we need to get some context and some background. So compounding requires really three things. It requires money to invest, right? You're going to make some kind of investment, whether through leverage, borrowing it, earning it, saving it, whatever, however you got your money, you have buying power, be that through debt, be that through leverage, whatever, you have buying power. So the first thing you have is money. The second thing you have is time. And then the third is the rate at which it earns money and the rate in which that's reinvested. So money, rate, and time. Now, time's the most important one because it's the only one we can't save. We can't slow it down. You either compounded today or you didn't, right? You either were engaged in compounding today or you didn't. And if you didn't, you lost another day. So if you had a financial statement and next to it you drew your time statement, in your asset column you have so many years. And those years are either going to produce income as they're expended or not. And if you expend your time with attention, that's the currency of time is attention. If you're placing your attention elsewhere and your activities elsewhere, you're losing that time. So time's important. The second one is the amount of money you have. That's probably the least important one. If you give me a penny and you start me off with a penny and I crank up the rate and I've got plenty of time, I'll blow it up. I'll absolutely blow it up. If you double pennies, bang, you blow it up. So rate is dependent on education and consistency and temperament. So that kind of sets us up to answer your question, mutual funds. One of the things I don't like, and I'll employ a Warren Buffett phrase here, he used the word enormous. That's the word he used. He says, if you're paying 1%, right, takes an enormous toll over your life, and it's a headwind against that rate of compounding. So if I put my money in a mutual fund and by the way, 87% of actively managed funds don't even beat the S&P 500. Almost 90% of them fail to do it. That's right out of this year's Spiver report. And it gets worse the more time you put in there. But if I have a headwind, this makes no sense to me. Why would I put my money in something that underperforms the S&P, so your rate's low anyway, and then give up another percent or so, which would have an enormous impact? So your question's well-founded, is when people look at mutual funds, it's an ignorance fee. That's all it is. I'll ask you, why do people put money in mutual funds?
They just don't know better. Everybody else is doing it. My employer says, here's a great mutual fund. Here's my money.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. It's very simple. They don't know how to invest. If you don't know how to invest, if I went my whole life with someone else tying my shoes, and every time I wanted to tie my shoe, I asked someone else to tie my shoes, they'd say, why don't you tie your own shoes? The only possible explanation is I'm either lazy or I don't know how. Those are the only two. And the reason I use a metaphor like tying your shoes, people think, well, that's hyperbole, Andy. Of course, everyone learns how to tie their shoes. Okay, is investing and compounding a life skill or a skill for hire? Which is it? So everyone has that choice. If you make it a skill for hire, that means you feel there's some type of leverage by being able to have someone else do it, or you don't know how, or you're lazy. Well, there's not a lot of leverage in having someone else do it if they're going to put a headwind on your compounding power, and they're going to have results that fail to beat what the average investor could do just diversifying into the S&P, which, by the way, I think you'd be settling if you tried to only do that. So when I say double cash flow and compounding, I'm saying one of the first things you can do, think about this. You can recover a certain percentage of your compounding power simply by doing it yourself. Yes? So that's not a bombastic claim that I can increase compounding rate by not paying fees. All right? That's one step I could take towards independence and towards doing better. Now, we can talk. We'll talk more. I'm sure you'll ask, in the second half of the show or whenever about, well, what are other ways to increase my rate, right? But understanding money, rate, and time, and that fees take money off your rate and create a headwind. Well, there's a nice start for people. So this should
Well,
be about introspection, right? If you're listening to this right now, you think, okay, how do I put numbers on this? How do I quantify this? If you're in a 401k in the United States or RSP in Canada or a superannuation in Australia, or even they stole the name 401k in Japan, they call it a 401k just like we do. Wherever you are in the world, the first question is the performance of that fund better than what you could do on your own? And the answer is 87% of the time in the US, no, it's not. And then number two, if you stack on that poor performance another fee and put a headwind on that, quantify that. Do the math over your lifetime. So, well, I have a certain amount of days in the compounding formula. So if I spend years doing this, what does it do to my compounding results? It would make no sense to me if I didn't have some type of idea of what the result would be before I participate in a program. So if I go into the mutual fund compounding, arena, and I don't know what I'm likely to get on the other side of that, I don't know how smart I am if I participate in a program that I don't have at least a projection on. Hey, things can change. I might miss the mark, but to not even have a projection or a goal or some math behind that strikes me as less than being the smartest we could be.
No, you brought up a good point about fees, and I want to go back to that because that was one of the most eye-opening things that I ever learned about mutual funds was from you, and I've seen some other videos as well about it, just about how much fees from mutual funds really, detract from that overall compounding. Do you have some numbers or some statistics that you could share with us that kind of shows that?
Yeah, if you're paying 0.5%, 1%, you're giving about a quarter of the total. So whatever you would have had, you're giving them 1/4. So think about that. You're going to give someone 1/4 to perform less effectively than yourself at a lower rate. If you go on the other end, so a fourth is 0.5% might be standard. Great. So you're going to have given up a fourth of your wealth for what? That's a lot to give up.
And during the downturn too, they're getting paid regardless.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
On the other side, if you're in a real, fancy one, John Bogle in his book, it's not, you don't see it as often today because they fought against these high rates, but he uses 2.5%. 80% of the money will go to Wall Street if you have a fee that high because the compounding loss and the compounding costs in their favor. So, you're anywhere from losing a quarter, if you want real numbers, losing a quarter of the result up to 80% of the result, depending on where you are on that spectrum. And it's so complicated because there's 12B1 fees and no load fees and front load fees and early this and that fee. I mean, there's probably 20 different fees that you could pay, and that is nebulous and hard and difficult to see. You have an expense ratio, and you say, "What's my bottom line? What's my expense ratio?" But you got to double check that to make sure it adds everything in it.
For sure. Now, what about, we have mutual funds there. We have the loads that are in there, playing devil's advocate a little bit here. You're saying to, put it in an S&P or index fund or whatever it might be, and it will beat the other mutual funds. Are you promising, I'm playing devil's advocate, are you promising that I'm going to make better returns? What do you say to that person?
No, I would never make a promise to anybody on anything. I mean, there's no upside to me doing it. I will just tell you what I can promise you. If you look at the actual numbers, just take the last 15 years. And if you actually look at the results of the last 15 years, and it's been this way since, I've been doing this so long, Del. Go to the SPIVA, S-I, how do you spell it? S-P-I-V, SPIVA. How do you spell that? S-P-I-V-A. And that really stands for S&P Index versus actively managed. So there you go. S&P Index versus active. Go to spiva.com. They'll show you all the numbers. And this last year they came out, over the last 15 years, 87% of the time they failed to beat the S&P. Now, if they magically turn it around and Wall Street guys are magically brilliant overnight. Well, maybe that changes, but in my 30 plus years of watching this, it hasn't. So will I promise a guy that? I don't know, Del, if I'd promise him a thing. I don't know that I would. I don't know what my upside is. I just know what I'm going to go do. And if people have a fear mindset where you want to have a result projected, knowing that it could happen or not happen. What I'm saying is having no result projected is crazy. And on one end of the spectrum, having no result is crazy. On the other end, expecting a guaranteed result is equally crazy. What makes sense to me is work your numbers, make your projections, have a fourth pillar called risk management. So when things don't go well, you force them to go well, right? You make adjustments, and then you're compounding. And there are like we just took, in the first half, we talked about the fees. We haven't talked about the creativity. We've talked about reclaiming a percent, but I claim that you can actually, and this I can promise you. In fact, maybe we do this when we come back. This I can promise you. Not only could you reclaim that percent you lose in fees or whatever that number is, but you can add more to what you're doing right now. The average investor is simply not collecting the amount of money they collect to compound. And I know that's a bold statement, but that I can promise you, that I would promise you for sure. No question in my mind.
All right. Well, let's do this then. Let's take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll get into how you can really supercharge your wealth building by optimizing your compounding strategy. So don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to this episode of Rich Dad Stockcast, where we're talking about how to double your compounding power and explode your wealth. Now, before we dive back in with Andy, just a quick reminder to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your feedback really helps to bring you more of the content that you want to hear. And don't forget to visit stockcastbonus.com for free resources that can help you on your financial journey. All right, so let's get back to our guest, Andy. Now, Andy, before we went to break, you had this bold word, guarantee. You rarely use the word guarantee.
Yeah, almost never.
Almost never. Now, leading up to this, we talked about how to really reclaim, that lost percentage points. But you also guaranteed and talked about this. I'll say it, a magic wand to maybe add a few more points to it, if you will.
Man, I'm getting piled on here. I got to be careful what I say. I like this, Del. I like this.
So, what would you say? How does someone do it? How does someone not just reclaim those missing percentage points, but how does someone add on to it?
You get educated. And you click this little magic mouse. It's not a magic wand. I should have said it's the magic mouse from Apple. You click this thing, and if you click it and you know what you're doing, cash comes. Click and get paid. It's click and get paid. I'll elaborate with an example. Look, I promise, I guarantee that if you go to Vegas, I guarantee this. If you go to Vegas and you get on the crap table and you play for enough time, they will eventually take all of your money. It's simply a matter of time. Now, I can't guarantee you that you'll win a certain hand of blackjack or that you'll lose a certain hand, but I will flat out guarantee you for sure that if you participate in that process long enough, the casino will get all of your money, all of it. It is a transfer of wealth. So that's what I mean when I say that, is there are certain things that I can't tell you in a specific instance. For example, COVID hits. My wife and I have invested in some syndications. You know what? We didn't get paid for some months during COVID. We didn't get distributions. Why? Because no one was paying rent. And if no one pays rent, there's no net operating income. And if there's no net operating income, you can't make distributions if there's no profits. Okay. But I will tell you, so I can't guarantee that I'm always going to collect rent every single month. But I would say if I continue to do this over a period of 10 years, I'm going to collect more rent than I lose if I know what I'm doing at all, right? It's just the reality. So I'll give you an example. I have two sons. They both trade their own accounts, and my older son has a custodial account, and he should really we haven't taken the time to disconnect me from it. He turned 18, and so I can still see it. And because we're all connected to the same account, if he does something, my phone will light up and I ignore it. And if I do something, his phone will light up and I'll say, "What's Dad doing?" But he bought some Citi, for example, not too long ago. Well, probably a year, 2 years ago, something like that. He bought some shares of Citibank. Okay. He's going to get a 4% dividend on that. Okay. Now, if he has someone else manage that for him, he's going to take that 4% dividend and give some of it back, or any growth. Some portion of that wealth is going to be slowed by a fee. Okay, great. But what I'm submitting is that a person could learn to double that most of the time, most months, not every month. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, right now, he'll collect another 4% easily, very conservatively, by doing trades that have a 90% probability. He's very smart because he knows he's 18. He knows he's got what the 55-year-old guy doesn't have, which is compounding time. So he doesn't need to be greedy. So he will look at these numbers. So he'll write some out of the money covered calls. And if you don't know what that is, we'll go to Stockcast bonus and learn what it is. But he'll write those, and he usually writes them with 90+% probabilities of success. So like the casino, right? I can't tell you which hand you're going to win, which one you're not. I just know the probabilities that the casino will win more hands than you do. Well, I know my son will win more hands than he loses, and he might have to have a buyback or make adjustments, but 9 times out of 10 months out of the year, he's just going to collect that cash flow. 2 months out of the year, he might have to make an adjustment, which he can do. And so he'll get another 4%. He'll get another 4% from that covered call writing activity, and you can do that in an IRA. Is it guaranteed that he'll get it every time? No. But is it guaranteed he'll get it most times? Yes, I would say it is, based on probabilities. In the same way I would say a casino is going to transfer that money, it's a very similar thought to me. And I tell you this, I can guarantee this: when he clicks that mouse, that money will hit his account instantly through a fiber optic network at the speed of light. Click and get paid. So think about what that does. Just add up those numbers. Let's say the market as a whole grows 8 to 10% a year average over the last 20 years. It used to be 8. I think it's now up to about 10, right? It's having growth. Okay, throw a dividend on that of another 4% in a dividend. Now throw another 4% on top of that with some very conservative call writing that you could do in an IRA. It's that conservative. Doesn't require margin, right? Doesn't require anything but stock ownership. I'm telling you, put those numbers in a compounding calculator for a kid that's 18 and see where he is at 50 or 40. It's ridiculous. It's completely ludicrous. That's why financial education is better than occupation education. We've been running some numbers on this. I've been looking at different colleges and different schools when my kids are that age, and I think every kid should go to college. Some people say, it's a waste of time. No, it isn't. I met my wife in college. That's not a waste of time. There's so many cute girls in college, man. That's where the sororities are. So that's where you go. That's value in that. That's why you spend the money. And besides, if you're playing hoop, it's way fun to go to college. There's great parties. There's fun stuff to do. There's people to meet. There's networks to be had. I love it. Now, the education side of it, you got to decide if you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. But if you're going to have, a liberal arts type of thing and study history, it's going to be tough to get an ROI on that, $400,000 student loan at your private school. I like the idea of this simple education much better to increase compounding by taking your dividend and then doubling that. Or sometimes in my case, I can triple that by creating new sources of income. So, think about that. You're going to take ownership of the ship, which cuts Wall Street out right there. In Buffett's words, that's enormous. That's enormous. The amount you save 1%, that's enormous. Well, if saving 1% is enormous, adding another 4 or 5 through some conservative call writing, that's 4 or 5 times as enormous. So that's, super enormous, super duper enormous. So yeah, people can. I don't like being bombastic and acting like, oh, it's easy to do. It's simple to do. Consistency, temperament, education, it pays off. So there's not anyone in the world that knows anything about investing that can argue with that. I'm wrong a lot, but on that particular point, anyone that argues with that, it's simply confession that they have no idea what compounding is or the power of it. Absolutely.
Well,
So if you go ahead.
I think you bring up a really good point, because as we talk about compounding, naturally our minds go to the financial side, but you're right on the educational side. The average CEO reads one book a week. Let's call it 50 books per year over,
For sure.
That over 5 years, that's 250 books compared to the average person that reads one book a year, and over 5 years, that's 5 books. So then you have 250 books versus 5 books. There's really a big difference there. Now, as you talk about teaching your own kids and starting their financial education young, what's some advice to us parents, that you've had success with? You've done a great job with raising your boys and teaching them financial education. What's some things that you taught them that could maybe help the other parents out there teach?
Well, I don't know that I've done a great job. The jury's still out. They're not out of the house yet, so they're still hanging around. One of them's getting close, so we'll see how he does. So the jury's still out on whether Marcy and I have done the best we can do. We've given a good effort. Practice what you preach. I make a lot of mistakes, and it's important for my sons to see the mistakes that I've made so they can avoid them. But if you're not doing it, it's going to fall on deaf ears. If you're not doing it, your kids are going to roll their eyes, Is a guy, maybe a guy's sitting there, he's got a habit like I do, eating Ben & Jerry's. And I say, son, don't you be eating this Ben & Jerry's. I'm telling you, it's really rough. That doesn't have much credibility with him, right? And so I try in the realm of finance to be a decent example, my wife and I, to do our best to do the things that we've tried to teach our sons as imperfectly as we do them. I think example is just really, really important. Second of all, learn by doing. You can yap at your kids all day long and sit and talk about it, but we opened up in a custodial account and they put their real money in it and they have real gains and real losses, and you make it real so they're gaining from doing. I don't have a problem with reading books, but books are an important part of my life. I got a bunch on my shelf. I have probably a couple thousand books that I've read in my life. I don't know how many there are. But I got to tell you, books are for people who are genuinely interested in success. But if you're committed to success, you're going to get a coach. It's kind of like the Olympics we just had. People who are interested in swimming, read a book on it. If you're interested in swimming, if you're committed to a gold medal, get up, start working out, go to a different level. Like, swimmers can't read themselves to a gold medal. You got to get your freaking butt in the pool, get your coach on the side with a whistle telling you what to do, and do it. And so, while I appreciate the idea of reading for interest, I can learn a lot of stuff reading. It's not a bad activity, but it's a passive activity. No one's ever made any money by reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. No one has. They make the money when they buy the asset, when they do it. And so people who are interested in success, they'll read a book, and that's great. It's good value, I guess. But when you're committed, you get coaches, you get mentors, you get a team, you start doing stuff, and setting the book down and doing. Let me give that as a caveat, and you can get into podcast problems. If you have a dream that's really, really terrible or really, really awesome, either way, and you wake up, you'll feel good or bad depending on what you were thinking about while you're asleep. Well, scrolling on social media is very much like that. It's a dreamland. Podcasts like this are dreamland. And as people visualize things or think about things, they can get a great dopamine hit or or an adrenaline fear or whatever it is. You can have an emotional roller coaster by reading a book or watching a podcast. And what I found, having done this for 20 years, it's why I don't really go out and speak much anymore, is, I used to go over to, go to Canada or South America or Europe or wherever. You got a group of 5,000 people just cheering, but no one's doing anything. And they're all excited and getting dopamine hits over what they think about doing rather than what they're doing. Well, that's what books do. They make you think about it. Podcasts like this make you think about it. But really, it's when you get your hands dirty and really dive in, start learning, and then doing stuff. There's no money made by talking about it, right? There's no money made. So if you want to double your compounding and help your kids double theirs, start doing stuff. And I just can't emphasize that enough in the hours that people spend scrolling or listening or watching. It's important to get information, but for every hour of Stockcast, you should have an hour of study in a real account, like our Mentor Club is about doing. We do it. We have the trades. We do it. That's the form for that. We just do it. And so you want to have a balance for every book you read. If it's really means something to you, have it a coach too. For every idea you reflect and yap about, go out and get it done. So I'm very much about action in my life right now. You can tell. Get yourself going. Do it.
I agree. Anytime I've wanted to excel, anytime I wanted to go somewhere faster, safer, I've always hired a coach. Now, I want you to put your coaching hat on for a second. And if you were to challenge someone that's watching this to take a specific action, what would it be?
Well, it's not for me to tell them what to do. I don't care what people do. My mission is to elevate the well-being of humanity, and to do that by providing education. Whether a person receives that gift or not, that's entirely up to them. So, if you're asking me what I would tell them to do, first steps, you learn and then you do. You have to do it in that order. You don't do it and then learn. You learn by doing, right? You learn and then you do. Get a paper trade account and go. I don't care if you get it from me or someone else. There's a lot of great teachers out there. Maybe my style isn't perfect for some people. Maybe it's awesome for most. But what we do is we tell people the best place to get started is Stockcast. For sure. Stockcast bonus. Go get the bonus. Doesn't cost anything. Put in your time and then start doing stuff, right? In terms of our topic, though, if you wanted a specific way to increase your compounding, add an option strategy that is conservative, some type of credit trade strategy that is based on ranges rather than direction, that's based on probabilities rather than up or down, and start there. And say, that's what I'm going to learn. If my kids can learn it at 8th grade, what is that? Age 14, 13, something like that. If they can learn it at 8th grade, at age 14 and 15, then any adult in the world, with average intellect can do it. So start there, add your compounding, and just take whatever you think you're doing now, whether it's 0 or 20. Add 4 or 5% to that in a compounding calculator, see what it does to your life. So can a person double their compounding power over what most people? Learn leverage. Leverage is just, your compounding can accelerate through leverage like way more than double by simply learning how to use leverage the right way for the real estate investors and for the options investors that want to do it without debt. So that's how you double compounding power, is you learn and then you do. And that's totally in someone else's hands. It won't affect my, stock portfolio if someone else is, I'll write mine and they'll write theirs or they won't, but I'll definitely write mine. So I offer, but I don't try to coach people and crack in the whip saying, you need to do this. No, you don't. People can do what they want. I'm a big believer in that personal freedom. So that's kind of my rant, I guess. I don't get political on the show. I stay apolitical. I just, the idea of something for nothing just goes against every single thing that I feel in my brain. The idea that I shouldn't contribute and work my butt off and all that stuff blows my mind right now. It just blows me away. Do we need to help each other out? Sure. But I'd certainly rather be the one giving a hand than having to take one all the time. We're going to have to do both in our life. I'm helping people, they help me. It just seems to me there ought to be a nice balance of that. So I'm kind of on the warpath in terms of, look, if you want to double your compounding, then go make it happen. Go do something, because it's within your power to do it. And if it's within your power to do it, then I think it's incumbent upon me to do it if it's within my power. If it's not within my power, maybe I need some help. But if it's in with your power, and everyone has time, I don't charge for Stockcast bonus, for example. You can go click it, see it, learn. If you want to go a different direction, fine. But there are resources that can help people with that stuff.
Wonderful. Andy, what a great episode. This was so good.
I hope I didn't punch. I hope I didn't punch, too hard, because you gotta be sensitive, everybody. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun to talk about.
It really was. And if you thought it was fun, throw a comment in there as well. Tell us what you love to hear. But anyways, that's it for this episode of Rich Dad Stockcast. I hope you found our conversation fun on doubling your compounding power and boosting your wealth helpful for you. All right. Big thanks to Andy Tanner for sharing his insights with us. And whether you're just starting with investing or planning for retirement, staying informed and educated is crucial. And don't forget to check out stockcastbonus.com for some great free resources that Andy spoke about that'll help you on your financial journey too. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave that comment below. Your feedback really helps us to improve and deliver the content that you want to hear. And if you found this useful, share it with your friends, share it with your family so they can make smarter financial decisions too. Thanks for tuning in to Rich Dad Stockcast. Until next time, stay smart, stay invested, and take control of your financial future. I'm Denney, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.